Hank Williams was 29 years old when country music lost him forever. But here's what most people don't understand about his death, or his life. The man who wrote "I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry" wasn't just singing about heartbreak, he was living it. Every single night. And the story of how Hank Williams went from a skinny kid in rural Alabama to the most legendary voice in country music history, then lost everything by the age most people are just getting started, is one of the most haunting cautionary tales in American music. This is the true story behind the legend, the rise, the pressure, the unraveling, and the warning Hank Williams left behind for anyone chasing fame. Stay until the end, because what happened to Hank Williams isn't just history, it's a mirror. The crowd was screaming his name. Thousands of people. Packed venues. Fans who knew every single word before Hank Williams even opened his mouth. When he stepped up to that microphone and sang the opening lines, "Hear that lonesome whippoorwill, he sounds too blue to fly," the room went quiet in a way that felt almost holy. This was country music at its absolute purest. Raw emotion, real pain. A voice that seemed to reach directly into your chest and squeeze until tears came whether you wanted them or not. And here's the part that still haunts older country fans decades later. The man who sang about loneliness better than anyone in history was drowning in it. Picture this scene clearly. You're standing on the biggest stage of your life, the Grand Ole Opry, the absolute peak of country music. Nashville, Tennessee, the lights are blinding. The applause is deafening. Everything you've ever dreamed about is right here, right now, happening. You've made it. You've actually made it. And when you walk off that stage, you feel nothing. No joy, no peace, no relief, just emptiness so heavy it threatens to crush you completely. That was Hank Williams. Night after night. Show after show, city after city. Applause on the outside, silence on the inside. Think about that for a second. Really let it sink in. To understand how Hank Williams became the most celebrated and most tragic figure in country music history, you have to go back to the very beginning, before the records, before the radio appearances, before the fame that would ultimately consume him whole. Alabama, September 17, 1923. Hiram King Williams was born into poverty in a small rural community called Mount Olive. No silver spoons. No industry connections. No path laid out before him. Just a struggling family and a boy who seemed to feel everything more intensely than anyone around him. His father, Lon, was mostly absent, in and out of hospitals dealing with lasting issues from World War I. His mother, Lily, was tough as nails, running a boarding house to keep food on the table, raising children largely alone in Depression-era Alabama. It wasn't an easy childhood, but it was real, grounded. The kind of upbringing where you learn about hardship firsthand, where pain isn't theoretical, where struggle has a face you recognize, and somewhere along the way, young Hank Williams picked up a guitar. Here's what most people don't know about his early years, and it fundamentally changes how you should hear his music. Hank learned to play from a black street musician named Rufus Payne, a man nicknamed T-Tot, who taught him blues, rhythm, and that raw emotional delivery that would later become Hank's unmistakable signature sound. For years, T-Tot mentored young Hank on street corners, showing him how to connect with an audience, how to make music feel alive, how to transform simple chords into something that moves people. Think about that for a moment. The voice of country music, the genre often associated with rural white America, was fundamentally shaped by a black blues musician on the streets of Depression-era Alabama. That's not trivia. That's not a footnote for historians. That's the foundation of his entire sound. Hank Williams didn't just learn chord progressions. He learned how to make a guitar cry, how to bend a note until it physically hurt to hear, how to turn simple words into open wounds that listeners could feel deep in their own chests. By 14, he was already performing professionally. Local radio shows, small clubs, dance halls. Anywhere someone would give him a stage, the kid had something undeniable, a quality in his voice that made people stop mid-conversation and listen. But nobody, not even Hank himself, could have predicted how fast everything was about to change. If you want to truly understand the Hank Williams story, the meteoric rise, the crushing pressure, the impossible expectations that would eventually destroy him, you need to understand this single night, June 11th, 1949. The Grand Ole Opry, Nashville, Tennessee. The most prestigious stage in country music, the dream destination for every aspiring country artist in America. Hank Williams walked out in front of that crowd, nervous, skinny, carrying a guitar and more ambition than his body could hold, and prepared to make his debut. He sang Lovesick Blues. Here's the thing about that song. It wasn't even original to Hank. Other artists had recorded it years earlier. But when Hank Williams sang it, With that voice, that ache, that delivery that made you feel like he was confessing something too personal to say out loud, it transformed into something else entirely. The crowd went absolutely wild. They demanded an encore, then another, then another. 6 encores. 6. That almost never happened at the Grand Ole Opry. Certainly not for a debut performance. But the audience literally wouldn't let him leave. They kept clapping, stomping their feet, demanding more. The managers had to practically drag him off stage because the rest of the show had to continue. And just like that, a star was born. But here's the part most Hank Williams biographies skip over too quickly. That triumphant night set up everything that came after. The impossible expectations. The crushing pressure. The standard he'd be measured against for the rest of his short life. When you debut like that, there's nowhere to go but down. And everybody's watching, waiting to see when you'll fall. Before we go deeper into this story, if you genuinely appreciate country music history, the untold stories behind the legends, the truths mainstream radio forgot, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. We bring you the stories that shaped American music. The ones that actually matter. Now, let's talk about what success really did to Hank Williams. Here's something most people fundamentally misunderstand about fame. It doesn't fix you, it exposes you. Whatever cracks you had before, whatever doubts, whatever pain, whatever unresolved trauma you were quietly carrying, fame doesn't fill those gaps. It puts a massive spotlight on them. A blinding spotlight that makes every flaw visible to the entire world. And Hank Williams had plenty of cracks. Chronic back pain from a spinal condition called spina bifida occulta that he'd endured since childhood. A history of emotional instability. A growing dependency on alcohol and painkillers that helped dull the sharp edges of a life that felt too overwhelming to face sober. Before fame, these were private struggles. Personal battles, the kind of pain you carry quietly behind closed doors, hoping nobody notices. After fame, every weakness became amplified. Every flaw magnified. Every dark impulse found more opportunity to flourish. Because here's what fame actually brings that nobody warns you about. Access. Access to more alcohol, more substances, more people willing to enable your worst habits because they want to stay close to your star. More nights on the road with zero accountability. More hotel rooms where loneliness echoes off the walls and nobody's there to stop you from making terrible decisions. The schedule alone would have broken most people. By 1950, Hank Williams was everywhere. Radio appearances, recording sessions, live performances crisscrossing the entire country. His songs climbed the charts one after another. Your Cheatin' Heart, Cold, Cold Heart, Hey Good Lookin', Jambalaya, I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry. He was the undisputed voice of country music. The king. The living legend. And he was completely exhausted. Think about what that life actually looks like when you strip away the glamour. New city every night. Bus rides that never end. Stages that blur together until you can't remember which town you're in. Fans constantly wanting pieces of you. Autographs, handshakes, moments, pieces you're not sure you have left to give. And somewhere in the middle of all that success, you realize something terrifying. You don't recognize yourself anymore. The man on stage, the confident performer, the country music icon feels like a character you're playing, a mask. But the real you, the one staring at hotel ceilings at 3 a.m, unable to sleep, that person is disappearing, fading more every night. Hank Williams once described feeling completely alone in rooms full of applause. Read that again. Slowly. Rooms full of applause. Thousands of people screaming your name. Fans who would do anything to shake your hand. And you feel utterly alone. That's not poetry. That's not artistic exaggeration. That's a warning sign nobody recognized until far too late. Here's something that will fundamentally change how you understand Hank Williams. He became famous singing about working-class pain, heartbreak, loneliness, the quiet struggles of ordinary people just trying to survive another day. His fans didn't just enjoy his music, they felt understood by it, seen, validated in their own suffering. When Hank sang Your Cheatin' Heart Will Tell on You, people experiencing their own betrayals felt less alone. When he sang about being lonesome enough to cry, people sitting isolated at 2 a.m. thought, he gets it, he understands me. That connection is sacred, but it's also an enormous burden, because when you become the voice of the people, expectations become crushing. You're not allowed bad days, not allowed to struggle publicly, not allowed to simply be human. Everyone needs something from you. Nobody asks how you're actually doing. Hank was carrying the emotional weight of millions finding solace in his songs. And every night he poured that pain out on stage, he gave something away. Something that didn't regenerate. Hank's devastating marriage, his battle with displacement and identity, and the tragic final ride that ended everything on New Year's Day 1953. But remember this, Success tests your foundation, not your talent, and if those roots aren't deep enough, the higher you climb, the harder you fall. In 1944, a 21-year-old Hank married Audrey Mae Shepherd. By every account, it was a passionate relationship. Intense. The kind of love that burns hot enough to warm you through cold nights or burn the entire house down. Audrey was ambitious, strong-willed, and shared Hank's dreams of musical stardom. In many ways, they were true partners building something together from nothing. But here's where things get complicated in ways most people don't fully appreciate. The road became a third presence in that marriage. Think about what that actually means in practical daily terms. Nights apart turned into weeks. Weeks stretched into months of complete disconnection. Phone calls from random cities that felt hollow and rushed. Missing birthdays, anniversaries, ordinary Tuesday evenings, all those small moments couples need to stay genuinely connected. Hank would finally come home completely exhausted, emotionally empty from pouring himself out on stage night after night. Meanwhile, Audrey was home alone managing their entire life, raising their son, handling bills, dealing with everything while her husband became increasingly famous and increasingly absent. Resentment doesn't need an invitation to grow in those gaps. It just grows. There were explosive arguments, bitter jealousy, accusations that wounded both of them in ways that never fully healed. The kind of fights where words become weapons and scars remain long after voices stop shouting. Audrey wanted her own singing career desperately. She wanted to perform alongside Hank, share that spotlight, be recognized as more than just the wife. But record executives weren't interested in her voice. They wanted Hank solo. That created its own quiet, corrosive tension. An unspoken competition between husband and wife that poisoned everything. Here's the question history keeps asking about their relationship. It's not, will this marriage survive? That's too simple. The real question is deeper. Can identity survive? Because when a man loses the place where he feels most at home, when his marriage becomes just another battlefield instead of a refuge from the world, everything else becomes noise. And noise never replaces peace. Nothing does. They divorced in May 1952. Just 7 months before Hank Williams died. You can hear the wreckage bleeding through his music from that period. Your Cheatin' Heart wasn't just clever songwriting designed to sell records. It was confession disguised as melody. When Hank sang those lyrics, you could practically feel the regret sitting heavy on his thin shoulders. The exhaustion. The loss. People often say fame destroys marriages. No, that's too easy. Displacement destroys marriages. The constant moving. The shifting identity. The overwhelming feeling that you belong everywhere in the world and simultaneously nowhere at all. The utter exhaustion of performing authentically for crowds of strangers while the one person who actually knows you, really knows you, drifts further away each day. Hank Williams wasn't built for polished press tours and carefully managed public images. He was built for truth. For smoky honky-tonks and simple wooden stages. For singing about real pain to real people who'd actually lived it themselves, but the machine of success doesn't slow down for anyone's comfort. It only speeds up. By 1952, Hank Williams was unraveling in plain sight, and almost nobody could stop it. The substances that had once been occasional escapes from chronic pain became daily necessities just to function. Alcohol. Prescription painkillers for his constant back problems. Then additional substances to manage the side effects of the first substances, a cascading pharmaceutical disaster playing out inside a body already pushed past every reasonable limit. Shows were missed without explanation. Performances cut short when he couldn't continue. There were nervous whispers backstage, genuine concern from friends and colleagues who watched helplessly as the greatest voice in country music systematically destroyed himself in agonizing slow motion. Here's the trap that caught Hank Williams, and it catches so many others. When the entire world calls you a legend, admitting you're hurting becomes nearly impossible. Strength becomes just another performance. Pain gets pushed down, medicated away, ignored until it can't be ignored anymore. The stage lights get brighter, the show must go on. Always. But bright lights cast the sharpest shadows. In August 1952, the Grand Ole Opry, the exact same stage where Hank had achieved that legendary 6 encore debut just 3 years earlier, fired him. Fired. Let that fully sink in. The Grand Ole Opry. The institution that had launched him into stardom. The stage that transformed him into a household name. They cut him loose entirely. The reason? Unreliability. Too many missed shows. Too many nights showing up in absolutely no condition to perform. Too much liability for an organization trying to maintain its reputation. Imagine the psychological devastation of that fall. From 6 standing encores demanding more to being dismissed as too unpredictable to book. From the voice of country music to too much trouble. Some people hit rock bottom and somehow find the strength to bounce back. They discover the wake-up call they desperately needed and completely turn their lives around. We love those stories. Hank Williams hit bottom and kept sinking. The touring continued, now on smaller stages for diminished crowds, organized by a new manager frantically trying to salvage whatever remained of his deteriorating career. The drinking continued with renewed intensity. The self-destruction accelerated, and the people surrounding him? Most enabled it completely. Far easier to give the star whatever he demanded than to fight him. Far easier to look away than to acknowledge the uncomfortable, devastating truth that this man was actively dying in front of everyone. Here's where the Hank Williams story reaches its tragic, devastating conclusion. And I need you to really picture this scene clearly because it tells you everything about how completely his life had unraveled. December 31st, 1952. Hank Williams had a show booked in Canton, Ohio, a New Year's Day concert promising a significant payday that he desperately needed. But the weather conditions were absolutely brutal. Heavy snow blanketing everything, dangerous, nearly impassable roads. All flights grounded. So instead of waiting, Hank was driven. A hired driver named Charles Carr, just 18 years old. A powder blue 1952 Cadillac that would become iconic in country music history. And Hank himself in the back seat, rail thin, in terrible physical condition, already heavily medicated with substances that were supposedly helping him survive the grueling trip. They stopped at various points along the route. There are documented reports of injections given by doctors along the way, morphine, possibly chloral hydrate, all administered to help him through. Nobody was carefully monitoring cumulative effects. Nobody was tracking dangerous interactions. Nobody was thinking about tomorrow. Because for Hank Williams, by that point, only two modes of existence remained: perform or escape, and both were killing him simultaneously. The Cadillac drove through the endless night, through the bitter cold, through the darkness of rural highways where the only witnesses were falling snowflakes and heavy silence. Somewhere along that lonely route, nobody knows precisely when or exactly where, Hank Williams simply stopped breathing. He was discovered on the morning of January 1st, 1953, in the back seat of that Cadillac in Oak Hill, West Virginia, 29 years old. Already cold. The official cause listed on the death certificate: heart failure. But anyone who had witnessed his final torturous years understood the truth was infinitely more complicated. A lifetime of physical pain never properly addressed. Years of escalating substance dependency. A body pushed relentlessly past every reasonable human limit. A spirit slowly extinguished by the very fame that was supposed to bring fulfillment. The man who sang "I'm so lonesome I could cry" died completely alone in the back of a car on a frozen highway. Think about that painful irony. Let it settle. Country music has always told the truth about heartache, but sometimes the storyteller is living a chapter too painful to ever finish. Here's what older country fans understand about the Hank Williams story, the lesson they've passed down quietly for over 70 years now. Fame isn't the villain of this story. Success isn't the enemy. Displacement is. When you can no longer identify which version of yourself is actually real, the confident man commanding the stage, or the broken one staring at the ceiling at 2 in the morning, that's when small cracks become unbridgeable canyons. When you trade your roots for applause, when you sacrifice genuine peace for surface popularity, when you give away pieces of your authentic self faster than you could ever regenerate them, that's when the fall truly begins. And here's the tragic, inescapable arithmetic of Hank Williams' brief life. He was only 29 years old. 29. At an age when most people are just beginning to figure out who they really are and what they genuinely want, Hank had already experienced the complete rise, the absolute peak, and the total devastating unraveling of a legend. He left behind an immortal catalog of songs that still define country music 7 decades later. "You're Cheatin' Heart," "Cold, Cold Heart," "Hey, Good Lookin'," "I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry," "Jambalaya." Songs covered thousands of times by countless artists. Songs that have soundtracked millions of heartbreaks, lonely nights, and quiet moments of recognition. But he also left behind a warning that still echoes. Here's what Hank Williams taught us with his life. And this lesson applies whether you're chasing music stardom, YouTube success, entrepreneurship, athletic glory, or any version of making it. Fame is not the same as peace, and success without roots is just a slow fall from a greater height. The crowd can scream your name until they lose their voices. The metrics can look absolutely incredible. The world can call you a legend. But if you've lost track of who you actually are underneath all that noise, you've already lost the only thing that genuinely matters. Hank Williams gave the world songs that continue echoing 70 years later, songs that feel like they understand you on your absolute worst days. Music that reaches across time and grabs your heart without permission. But behind that legendary voice was simply a man. A man desperately trying to hold himself together while the world pulled him in every direction. A man who traded his peace for applause. Who gave away more of himself than he could ever sustain. Who rose so impossibly fast that the fall was almost mathematically inevitable. Fame made him bigger than life, but it never made him whole. And that's the warning country fans still carry, passed down like an old melody through generations. When success costs too much, even legends pay the full price. So let me leave you with the question that lingers long after the music stops. Not just for Hank Williams, for you, for me, for anyone building something they hope will actually matter. What are you trading for your dream? Because success will eventually hand you everything you asked for, and sometimes, it quietly takes everything else. If this story genuinely moved you, hit that subscribe button right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment below telling me directly what's the real lesson you're taking from Hank Williams' life. Because stories like this aren't just history to study, they're mirrors. And sometimes, the reflection we need most is the one that makes us genuinely uncomfortable. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.